Hi, I'm Dr. Jessica Clemens. I'm board certified psychiatrist and author of the Audible original Be Well, a guide to better mental health for all. And I am thrilled and happy to be a part of the 92 Why Happiness Summit with Deepak Chopra, well-being practitioner and pioneer in integrative medicine, and also the author of the Audible original Mind Body Zone, Living Outside the Box. How are you today?
Thank you, Dr. Jess. It's a pleasure to speak to you and be on the same platform as you.
I feel the same. I'm really honored to have this discussion with you about happiness and mental health. Maybe we can start with your Audible original. Could you tell us about Mind Body Zone, Living Outside the Box?
Well, yes. First of all, I was privileged to be part of this Audible original, the Mind Body Zone, Living Outside the Box. But the people I spoke to, including Oprah, including some amazing revolutionary thinkers and creatives, people who were expert on trauma, on sexuality, on our relationship with the universe, what I realized is that they not only looked at the world from outside the box, they didn't have a box altogether. They were truly creative, and they were able to give an experience to me of freedom and creativity such that I related to their creativity as what I call fundamental creativity, not simulated creativity. Fundamental creativity is when you create a new story or a new product or a new service that never existed before. Okay, so like in the internet came about, or all these new technologies that we never had before. That's a very big change from what we see as simulated creativity through artificial intelligence, which is becoming very common these days. Fundamental creativity is when you change context, meaning, story, archetypes, and relationships, and the old story totally dies and a new story is born. So, when I interviewed the scientist Simard, she basically discovered mother trees that are mothers to not only their offspring or the same species, but every tree in the forest, something we didn't know, through a neural fungal network. There was Oprah talking about the power of vulnerability. And there was this amazing psychiatrist, Gabor Mate, talking about healing trauma. And what he brought to light was everyone has been traumatized, therefore everyone needs healing, and on and on. So I just say this was an experience of freedom and learning and creativity for me as well.
I love to hear about the fundamental aspect of it. I think it's something that I'm, hoping to wrap my head around as I explore your Audible original. I'm so curious about happiness. That's obviously why everyone is here today. It's been on my mind, and I've had periods in my life where I've really grappled with it. How would you define happiness?
Well, there are many ways to define happiness, and people usually confuse happiness with joy. So happiness is always for a reason. Somebody wins the lottery, or they fall in love, or they get a job, or they become president of the company. So that kind of happiness comes from agencies. You need something to be happy. But when you're happy for no reason whatsoever, that's called joy. And it's our fundamental state. All you have to do is look at a baby. And unless the baby is hungry or wet, it's joyful. It's full of wonder. It's full of curiosity. And it doesn't have a reason. It's smiling, and it's actually babies bubble with bliss if you leave them alone. So what is that fundamental state? And that's a spiritual state of being connected to the source of all experience, which we call the true self, beyond our ego identity. And so that kind of experience of joy is not dependent on anything. Now, why I'm saying this is to create a context because, I have had a relationship with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, who is spontaneously joyful. He doesn't need a reason to be happy. Okay. And so one day in the year 2010, there was a bunch of us scientists, social scientists, and social scientists always coming up with figures and formulas and data and metrics. And His Holiness Dalai Lama is very tolerant and in fact encourages science because he knows it's the religion of our times. So he said, why don't you come up to our group? He said, why don't you come up with a happiness formula? And so actually we did. The social scientists led by a very intelligent social scientist from the University of California, Sonia Libomirsky, and everybody got together in a group. And then 2 years later, they came up with what is called the happiness formula. So now that you asked the question, let's share it with our audience. H is equal to S plus C plus V. H stands for happiness. S stands for set point in the brain. And this set point is produced by what we call the conditioned mind. So as a baby, if you were with parents and peers and your family, and later in school, you were with people who were constantly criticizing, condemning, playing the victim, or just unhappy, then you grow up to be unhappy. And if, on the other hand, your parents and your caretakers were always giving you attention, which means listening to you, affection, deep love and caring and compassion, appreciation, telling you about your unique gifts and being grateful to it, and accepting you, not changing you, then you grow up to be a happy person. Now, this happiness, what you call set point, as I said, is determined by our childhood upbringing, but it accounts for 50% of our happiness experience every day. Now, on the surface, this is not good news because your set point was determined not by you, but by your caretakers. But then the good part of this is now all the research shows that things like cognitive therapy or something called awareness-based cognitive therapy, and something even more important, which is just self-reflection and mindfulness training, can change your set point. So you can change your set point from happiness, from unhappiness to happiness if you have self-awareness and you practice some of the techniques we offer even on the Audible podcast. That's the first part of the formula. H is equal to S plus C. C is conditions of living, mainly money. So you would think, this is the very important part of being happy. But in fact, it only accounts for 10% of your happiness experience every day. So if somebody wins the lottery, they're going to be extremely happy in the beginning. In 6 months, they plateau. In 1 year, they're back to their set point. In 5 years, they become a little mean-spirited because they identify, their identity becomes money. They confuse self-worth with net worth. And, I have just written a book on abundance, which was inspired by Bob Marley and one of his lyrics. And he says, some people are so poor, all they have is money. And so money actually is the source of a lot of unhappiness. The extremely rich and the extremely poor are usually unhappy because their identity is money and they think about money all the time, both the extremely rich and the extremely poor. The extremely poor because they need money, and the extremely rich because they confuse, as I said, net worth with self-worth. So then there's 40% remaining. And this is the part that's called V. H is equal to S plus C, conditions of living, plus V, voluntary choices. 2 kinds of choices we make every day. The first choice is for pleasure. So shopping is the most common reason for people wanting to be happy, is shopping. You give them an iPhone 10, but then they want an iPhone 11. Then they want an iPhone 21. Then they want a yacht. Then they want an automobile, and on and on. So those experiences for personal pleasure, shopping, alcohol, entertainment, sex, they make you happy, but only for a short time. And then you have to repeat the activity so you can be happy again. And if you have an addictive personality, of course, you know that too much pleasure becomes addictive. And then addiction is the memory of pleasure, which is now no longer pleasure, it's painful. So there's a second choice that people make to be happy, and that's called fulfillment. When they have meaning and purpose in life, when they find a calling, then they find a reason to serve. And then there's something else, which is the fastest way to happiness, instant way to happiness, which is to make somebody else happy. And you can do that by giving them attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance. Everyone who's on this Audible, they can send an emoticon to someone right now and say, I love you, I'm thinking of you, I'm there for you, I'm grateful for your uniqueness, I'm holding your back, and see what happens. You'll instantly give them a dopamine hit. And if they do that with two other people, and they do that with two other people, my dream is one day we can create a pandemic of happiness.
Wow, what an explanation for happiness. And, I can't help but think about the many ways that people can get there, and how you so simply put it. I mean, wow. I think I'm a mother I have a 1-year-old. And when you talked about the happiness that just comes from babies, I mean, it's so powerful to see this child is just happy unless he's hungry or wet. I can't help but think about that.
So, Dr. Jess, as a mother, and especially 1-year-old, yet there's no verbal skills. So what they're looking at, by the way, are your eyes and the movement of your eyes. They're looking at your facial expressions. They're listening to the tone of your voice, and they're just guessing by your body language whether you're giving them attention, affection, appreciation, and acceptance. And that's all they're doing. And that creates a link between their emotional brain and your emotional brain, which we call the limbic brain. It's an actual biological phenomenon called limbic resonance, which then leads to limbic regulation and ultimately to limbic revision. The brain changes as a result of this experience of happiness, and that creates the set point. So watch out, your baby is watching you very carefully, not listening to you, but watching you.
That is such great advice. I will keep that in mind, because you're absolutely, just as you shared that, I can see different faces he may make in response to us.
We have 43 facial muscles that reflect about 100 different emotions. And nobody other than AI and babies can read these emotions.
My goodness. My goodness. Deepak, is it possible for everyone to experience happiness? Is this attainable?
So it's the ultimate goal of all goals. As a physician, many times I would ask my patients, so why do you want to get better? Well, I want to go back to my job. Why do you want to go back to your job? Well, I need to make a living. Why do you need to make a living? I need to take care of my family, send my children to school. I kept asking them, like babies do, why? And then they would say in the end, I just want to be happy. And then I realized that whatever we do, the end goal is happiness. So happiness is the goal of all goals. And the purpose of our existence is to find our joy. That's it. Joy is the healthiest response to existence. Otherwise, why bother living? I mean, you don't want to be on your deathbed and say, I worked so hard that now I have rotten teeth and heart attacks and cancer.
Absolutely. The truth here. Is there an intersection between mental health and happiness? And I'm a practicing psychiatrist, and people come in and they are looking for fulfillment. Obviously, some people are just looking to be able to function because their symptoms are so severe. But I wonder, does having a mental health condition affect one's ability to be able to experience the type of happiness that you've talked about?
Absolutely, absolutely. So right now, the world is on sympathetic overdrive, which means our sympathetic nervous system is overactive because of stress, anxiety, pandemic, financial reasons, people losing jobs, and all that sympathetic overdrive creates inflammation in the body. It creates anxiety. For some people, it even creates guilt and shame, and of course, depression. And at this moment, every 40 seconds, somebody is dying from suicide. It's become the second most common cause of death amongst teenagers. And I'll tell you, Dr. Jess, it's because we've lost the ability to be playful, which is every child comes to this world playful. And there's no one playing these days. Okay, they call it games, which of course, when you call it a game, then the end point is to win, not to play. When's the last time you saw a really good dancer and said, when is this dance going to finish? Or heard a really good song and wondering what's the ending of the song? Or watched a really joyful movie and wondering when it is going to end? It never happens because joyful experience is always in the present moment, and it's natural for us to have that. But right now, in a world where everybody's arguing about everything, where facts are confused with narratives and opinions, and everybody is living in fear, and everybody is canceling the other person. We live in what is called the cancel culture, and everybody is confusing their self with their selfies. Now we have a problem. When you sacrifice yourself with your selfie, then you have all this fear, anger, hostility, guilt, shame, depression, which also leads to chronic illness. So mental health, I would say, is the number one crisis in the world. We have a nonprofit, by the way, which is called Chopra Foundation. And we have a subsection of that called Never Alone. If anyone wants to check it out, www.neveralone.love, where we actually create communities for well-being, mental hygiene, suicide prevention, and now happiness.
People should certainly check it out. I think, I find that many people are struggling with that. And in my daily work and caring for people, that they're so isolated, and also to this point that you made about where we are with the state of things in the world, they're really struggling with that. Yeah. Are there techniques or things that people could do to help?
Yes. Also, by the way, on my Audible series, with every speaker, I actually created a meditation on their topic. So people can look at the world as if for the first time. Unless we step out of the river of our conditioned mind and see the world fresh, like a baby, true happiness is impossible. Okay, so it's very important. Now, you mentioned other things people can do. Yes, reflective self-inquiry, mindfulness itself, awareness of the body, awareness of the breath, awareness of our mental stories, awareness of our internal dialogue, awareness of our images, awareness of our relationships, awareness of our connection to the bigger ecosystem. In other words, self-awareness is the only key, ultimately, to generate lasting happiness. And also there are physical things. If you do exercise, you will find that you make lots of dopamine and oxytocin. If you have a loving relationship, you make, all these happy hormones that actually trigger the happiness experience. It's not only dopamine, it's opiates, it's oxytocin, the love hormone, it's vagal stimulation, it is your diet. If your diet is pure and not manufactured, refined, processed, or has the chemicals, if you have maximum diversity of plant-based foods, and the meats you eat come from animal sources that are not factory farmed, you can change genetic information in your body. 80% of serotonin in the body comes from the gut. So when we stimulate the gut through either vagal stimulation, chanting, singing, dancing, ballet, mind-body coordination, tai chi, qigong, when we balance our biological rhythms by going out in nature, even touching a tree or walking barefoot on the earth, you restore circadian rhythms, bring down inflammation, and you start to feel happy. So there are physical interventions for mental distress, and then there are mental interventions for physical distress, because the reason we're calling this the mind-body zone is the mind and the body are one unified process in our awareness. There's no, in the deeper domain, there's no mind-body connection. The mind is the subjective experience of consciousness, and the body and the physical world is what we call the objective experience of consciousness. You can't have one without the other. Whatever happens in the mind is reflected in the body and vice versa. So interventions, mental, but also physical.
And these are things that people can do right away. I mean, we can
Absolutely.
all think about our diet, exercise. We can think about those connections that we have with people, even, in the world.
Just stopping and taking deep breath and smiling. By the way, there's all this interesting data that when you smile, and if the Buddhists have a practice where they smile from their head to their toes. They close their eyes and imagine that every part of their body is smiling. You can try anyone to do that, and suddenly their mood will change and their biology will change as well.
Wow, such powerful stuff. And it's inside each of us is what it sounds like.
Correct.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to talk with you and learn about happiness and an opportunity for something that we all can really engage with in our daily lives, and think about the lives of other people around us and how we can help them to achieve happiness or to help bring them up, especially people who have children.
Right. So, Dr. Jess, it's a great pleasure to talk to you. All the best on your Audible podcast, and I invite others here who are listening to us to come to the Mind Body Zone outside the box at Audible, and benefit from what we have to share, you and I.
Absolutely. Thank you.